Hi everyone, this is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we'll be going over our Math Roundtable recap from April 8th, 2021. So we'll start with our first word problem. These are all word problems from practice HiSET tests. And the first one says, what are the solutions of x minus 7 times x minus 3 equals 0? Now, there are a couple things to notice here. First of all, it's not just asking us for one solution. It knows that there could be multiple solutions to get to this answer. So you'll see that all of our options have two numbers in them. Now, both the numbers have to work. So one of the ways that I could solve this is by trying to put in each variable one at a time in for x. So for example, I could start with a, negative 7 minus 7, negative 7 minus 3, and then solve that to see if it equals 0. Now, if any one of the numbers does not work, then that means that pair is automatically out. So it's a quick way if you wanted to do kind of a testing situation and try each one. Now, the other side of this is that I can use some of my prior knowledge to figure out which options might be the best. So if I take a look here, I notice that I'm going to end up with two numbers, whatever x minus 7 is and whatever x minus 3 is. And one of those numbers, or when I get both of those numbers rather, I will multiply them together. Now I notice that the solution is 0. And when I'm multiplying, the only way to get 0 is if I'm multiplying by 0. So one of those numbers has to come out to 0. Now that helps inform my decision because if I think, for example, negative 7 minus 7 is negative 14 and negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6, that's not going to give us 0 in one of these. So which of the options will give me 0 in one of those parentheses? Well, when I look at the last option there, 7 and 3, I know that if I put in 7, 7 minus 7 is 0 and 7 minus 3 is 4. 4 times 0 is 0. Or if I had 3, 3 minus 7 would be negative 4, but 3 minus 3 is 0. So both of those numbers could be plugged in for x, and both of them are appropriate solutions here to get 0 in the end. Now for word problem 2, it says, Connor surveyed a random sample of 60 employees at a company, and 24 said they carpool to work. Based on the results of the survey of 800 total employees of the company, what is the expected number that carpool to work? So you can see here that we have 5 options of numbers, and we have some important information to pull out. We have 60 employees that were sampled and surveyed, 24 carpool to work, and we need to take a guess that out of the 800 total employees, about how many of them would carpool to work based on what we know. Well, anytime I see a comparison like this, it's a great time to make a proportion. So in solving the proportion, I can set it up like this. I know that 24 out of the 60 people carpool to work. And I want to know how many out of the 800 total people carpool to work. So you can see that I put a question mark where I don't know. You could also put a variable in there like x or n or p, some letter to hold that space. Now, what do I do when I have a proportion? Well, I cross multiply and divide. So you find the two numbers that are diagonal from each other, in this case 24 and 800. So 800 times 24 and then divide it by 60. When we put all those together, we end up with 320. Now for word problem 3, it says Alex measured the length of his sofa. He reported the length as 7 feet, accurate to the nearest foot. The actual length of the sofa must be, now look at our options. This is not a typical word problem. In this problem, we need to pay attention to how this person is measuring and what they might be asking us about. Now, when I see that he reported the length as 7 feet, but it's accurate to the nearest foot, that tells me it probably isn't just exactly 7 feet, right? That's just kind of an estimate. It's good to have estimates or to be able to give kind of a rounded number rather than saying, for example, it's 6 feet, 11 inches, and 11 3/8 inches, right? That would be really specific. Sometimes we need those specifics, but sometimes we just need general. It's about a 7-foot couch. So when I look at the options, exactly 7 feet for A, not going to be a good option. For B, at least 7 feet. Well, if we're rounding to the nearest foot, could it be just a little bit less than 7 feet? Certainly, absolutely. So B, not at least 7 feet, we could go the other way as well. Now look at our last three options. We have at least a certain amount of feet and less than another amount of feet. Now I want you to think about what you know about rounding. When we're rounding a number, how do we decide when to round up or when to round down? Well, if the last number listed, and here they are decimals, is a 5, then we round up. And if the last number listed is below 5, then we round down. So which fits that description the best? It would be C, at least 6.5 feet. So that's, the measure just beneath the 7 feet where we'd round it up, but less than 7.5 feet. So it can't be 7.5 feet because then we would round up to 8. But if it were less than 7.5 feet, we probably just round it to closer to 7. So C is our best answer here. Now, for word problem 4, it says the following is Greta's work to solve an equation. In which step does Greta's work first include a mistake? Now, this is, again, a very unusual type of problem because we're used to doing problems where you will solve this yourself and have to come up with the answer. But we need to pay attention here and see where there might be a mistake along the way. So is it in step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Well, if we go through this problem together, we'll be able to do some of the math and figure out which step might have an error in it. Now, remember, in an equation, if you do something to one side, you have to do the same to another. So, for example, let's look at the first line. 8x squared minus 9x minus 2 equals 7x squared minus 4x. Now, what do you notice that's different between the original equation and step 1? Right away, I noticed that 7x squared is just missing from the right side. And I also noticed that the 8x squared has changed to x squared. So I have to figure out what they might have done. Since the 7x squared is gone, I'm going to assume that they subtracted 7x squared from both sides. If I subtract it on the right side, that means my 7x squared is just gone. I deleted it from this. And on the opposite side, I would take it away from that 8x squared. So 8x squared minus 7x squared leaves us with just a 1x squared, or more simply, x squared. So in step 1, all is well. So letter A is not going to be our answer. Now let's look at step 2. What changed in this one? Well, I noticed that we went from having a negative 4x to having 0. So here, I'm wondering if we got rid of that negative 4x. So let's check it. What's the opposite of negative 4x? Well, adding 4x. And we need to do that on both sides. So on the one side, we would get 0, just like it says on the screen in step 2. But on the other side, we have a 9x, and you'll notice there's a minus sign before it, subtraction. So we have to treat it like a negative 9. Now, if we had negative 9x plus 4x, that's actually going to bring the number a little bit higher, a little bit closer to 0. So we end up with negative 5x. We carried down the x squared, we carried down the minus 2. All is well in this step. Now let's see what happens in the next step. I notice that my 0 turns into a 2 and that my minus 2 is gone. So that tells me that I probably did a plus 2 on both sides to get rid of that minus 2 on the left side. So if I did plus 2 on that side, that would just leave me with x squared minus 5x, and then equals 2 because we took the 0 and turned it into a 2. So step 3 is good. We know now that the error is somewhere in either step 4 or step 5. Now for step 4, we see x minus 5 equals 2. Now I notice that the x squared and the 5x have now turned into just an x and a minus 5. So my guess is that there was some sort of dividing by x that happened here. Now, what do you remember from the beginning of this? That we have to do what? On one side, we have to do the same thing to the other. Do you notice any changes on the other side? Does it say 2 divided by x over there? It does not. So if you look at these steps 3 and 4, both of them say they equal 2. But we cannot have that. We can't have x squared minus 5x equals 2, and then x minus 5 equals 2. Changes have to happen on both sides. So we found our error. In step 4, they did not do the same thing to both sides. Now for our final problem, word problem 5, it says, this week a manager will train 3 employees to use new procedures. Each week after that, 2 additional employees will be trained. Which of the following expressions represents the number of employees who will be trained at the end of 8 weeks? All right, so we have these 3 employees in the first week, and then every week after that is just 2. So if it's 8 weeks total, that means the first week is week 1, and the remaining 7 weeks is week 2. So we need to start with those 3 employees and add on the other employees for the other weeks, which is 2 per week. Now, we know that there are 8 weeks total, but the 3 employees already marks that first week. So we really only have to account for the remaining 7 weeks to multiply by our 2 employees. So take a look at the options here. Which one makes the most sense here? In this case, we're going to choose letter A. 8 minus 1 is 7, and so that's going to account for those remaining 7 weeks where only 2 employees were trained each week. Plus, we'll add in that 8th week, or rather the first week, of 3 employees being trained. Thank you so much for solving with me today, and good luck on your math test. You can check out the Helms Academy on Instagram and Facebook and on our website at helmsacademy.org.